Mhm.
We have Jess Hilarious in the hot seat. And the reason why she's in the hot seat is not for her comedy, that's for damn sure. But
Wow,
it was because she
shade.
made it was because she made a comment that only women can have babies. And so this was met with some pushback on the Breakfast Club from their guest, Lene Vanny. I think that's how you pronounce her last name.
Benin.
Um, is it Vanny? Vanay? I feel like I should do anyways. So and
Black girl
she
magic.
basically, I know, right? She basically said anyone with a uterus can have a baby. And even if they don't identify as a woman, if they have a uterus, they can have a baby, which Jess did agree and said, yes, if you have a uterus, you can have a baby because you're a woman, basically is what she was saying. And so this met with some more pushback from like Laverne Cox and a whole community of saying that she's probably that she was being transphobic in her comment, in her statement. And Jess was standing 10 toes down on this that, yes, you're still a woman if you got a uterus, regardless of what you identify. And so this actually triggered an entire conversation about when does it become about womanhood versus being transphobic. Can you affirm and uplift womanhood without being transphobic? And how far have we gotten where we can just say that, yeah, they had a uterus, so therefore a man had a baby because they identify as a man? I guess that's the way it would be. Was that a trans man? Trans? Was that? Yeah, no, that's a trans man. But anyways, moving on. The whole question I'm asking you guys, because I realized I just befuddled it a little bit, is that what do you think about Jess Hilarious statement about women can have babies because they have a uterus, and that being her superpower, that because she can have a baby, and also the pushback from the LGBTQ community pertaining to her statement.
Man, that's a hot button issue right there. Here's why I think it's so hard to really discuss and really come to some sort of consensus. I think our language, our terminology has been so conflated at this point. I mean, we went from having men and women to then having trans men and then having trans women, then having trans women say, I'm woman just like the regular women. So now the regular women, birth women, need to call themselves cis women because we're all women. And I think what Jess was trying to do was to redraw these lines of distinction and say, okay, I am, she was defining her womanhood by her ability to bring forth kids or her biological structure being so that she could birth children, having a uterus instead of, let's say, testes and whatever. And the pushback to that was, if I remember correctly, it was like, no, no, anybody with a uterus can have a baby, even if it's a male. And I think the person was saying that to suggest that if someone was trans male, then they are still have a uterus, and that defeats Jess's superpower. But I think the conversation she was trying to have was she was trying to make a distinction that says, in order for her identity of womanhood to really resonate with her, she draws strength from the fact that she both has a uterus and presents as a female, and she's saying that makes her a woman. Okay, and that's it's hard to tell people what they're not, right? It's hard to tell people how that they aren't however they feel, or that they don't feel whatever they feel. The problem then comes is where do we how do we determine who has the ownership right over these terms? And as these terms are redefined, we try to redefine ourselves or find new words for ourselves or find ways to distinguish ourselves from terms that we used to associate with that may no longer clearly define us. I think that's where she was with that, right? So it's, for instance, I ran into a guy. This is going to sound like a digression, but I don't think it is. I ran into a guy, and he said that he missed the time when black people were called Negroes. And I was, I'm from Mississippi. I was like, I don't have good feelings about the word Negro and then how it was used and when it was used or whatever. And he was said, listen, no, he says, when we were Negroes, we had our businesses, we had Black Wall Street, we had this, we had that. There was a different kind of culture when we were Negroes. And I was like, hmm. And then I thought about how black people are continuously renamed every so often, from blacks to African Americans to Negroes to whatever, whatever, whatever. And I thought about it in terms of how, as a person moves in that space, when people put you into some sort of larger group and say, you're monolithic in the sense, or you're one big group, then you do try to find ways then to distinguish yourself. For instance, and I'll say this in our land, I grew up as a Pentecostal, okay, apostolic Pentecostal, Holy Ghost, speaking in tongues, whatever, whatever. That's how I grew up. I don't think that a lot of Pentecostals or apostolics would like for me to go around saying I'm Pentecostal or apostolic. They would feel like they need a distinction between me and them because my views or how I express it may be so different that they don't feel we should be sharing the same term. I think that's where she was coming from. And I think until we have the conversation about what we're just going to call people until women, cis women, I guess, are able to go back to just being called women and feeling like they can stand on that and that it's something exclusive that they own, I think this culture clash that we're having will continue. I don't think she tried to hurt anybody. I think she was trying to just stand on her little square, carve out her space, and say why she felt she could still define herself in this way.